topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
The National Alliance for Youth Sports was born out of a desire to bring order to the world of organized sports for children in America. While for the most part, children have a great experience playing sports, far too often parents and coaches lose perspective.
I'm gonna get you tonight because you let me down, brother.
No, I'm not.
You did. I'll get you, buddy. Cry about that.
This program is aimed at bringing some of America's best experts to talk about what we can do to change the atmosphere of win at all cost and parent poor behavior to one that focuses on children having a positive learning experience through sports. Here's our host, Fred Eng, the founder of the National Alliance for Youth Sport.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to, I think this is the 16th edition of Why Johnny Hates Sports, and we're happy this morning to have somebody from a little bit north of us here in Florida, Austin Tubbs. Good morning, Austin.
Good morning, Fred.
Hey, most people ride by parks and recreation. You see signs, this park here or that park there, and they never really understand, I think, what we people that have been in the recreation field, what that's all about. So can you take a minute and just explain to the viewers what it's all about?
Sure. So, Parks and Recreation is, I think, a very unique field because it's different for everybody. A lot of people only experience the recreation programming or summer camp aspect of Parks and Recreation. Some only experience the athletics side of it. Some experience exclusively the national parks and the state parks, which are more passive recreation experiences where you either camp or you just explore the trails. So my position includes a little bit of all of that because at my park, I have some nature trails. I have some organized recreation programming. And then in a couple of weeks from now, I'm opening up a new park in downtown Raleigh where it's going to be a play area, but it's also going to combine passive play space in order to be very intergenerational, to be able to cater to both the old and the young and young at heart. And I think that's what Parks and Recreation is all about, just a lot of mental and physical stimulation and health.
Were you an athlete, or the reason you got into recreation, was it because you played sports sometime in your life?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I used to play competitive junior tennis, and my goal was to become a recreation director of a private tennis resort. And when I was in school, I was attending Florida International University in Miami. I was studying for my bachelor's in recreation and sports management. I was sitting in a public sector budgeting class and thought, I'm never going to need to use this because I'm going to work in the private sector my entire career. So it just so happened that after I graduated college, my parents bought a house down in the Florida Keys, and I moved down there, got my first job in Parks and Recreation, and I fell in love with the field because of the amount of variety. I could both be a coach, I could be a umpire, I could be a referee, and I could be an administrator of sports. So I felt like I could make a positive impact and still pursue my passions of parks and recreation.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You mentioned opening a new facility there in Raleigh, and I'm thinking about the whole question that we've been dealing with for the last couple people like yourselves, talking about travel ball. And with travel ball, I've seen, and I'm wondering what you have seen as you're beginning to build these new facilities, because before, what would happen is, recreation baseball or whatever particular sport would be out there, and parents would register a field and get a permit. And now you see a lot of the travel ball situations that are happening. What have you seen now in Raleigh?
So in Raleigh, there's always an opportunity cost whenever you're opening up a new park. So with this park, it used to be a dog park and an athletic space. There used to be a couple of baseball fields over here, but we renovated them to turn them into a unique play space. And I think that we were just trying to find our identity. So we decided to create a more inclusive environment because athletics can sometimes be seen as a little bit niche. So I think that we've really tried to focus on putting all of our athletics over to our more athletic focused parks with actual programming and ability to run proper rec leagues and tournaments.
But you had said to me at one point in time, I remember about travel teams, you dealt with a parent one time that talked about having their kid in travel ball and it wasn't old enough, you thought. Tell us about that
Yeah,
story.
sure. So that was during my time with the town of Miami Lakes as a Parks and Athletics manager. There was a adamant parent that had petitioned to the Optimist Club in Miami Lakes to put his son on the travel team, even though his son was 5 years old. Um, so I spoke with the administrators of the Optimist Club, and they said that they don't do travel ball at that age because it doesn't promote growth and it doesn't inspire a love of the sport because it's just too much too soon for the kids. So I talked to the parent and explained to him that the overarching philosophy of this league was for recreation and development of talent and instilling the passion in the kids so that they would learn to have fun and fall in love with the sport first, develop skills, a baseline of competencies before they enter the more competitive score watching aspect of youth sports.
Spoken like a real rec professional there, Austin. I love it. I think it's great. But, across the country, we've seen, travel teams kind of taking over facilities. I mean, here I live in West Palm Beach and I live right across the street from seeing a baseball field that is totally empty. Nobody comes over like they used to register, to use those fields and form a league and kids playing baseball. And you see baseball participation now across the country keeps going down and down. And I wonder, you know, even though that you're not directly involved now with leagues and whatnot, what is the atmosphere there with the people? What are they telling you that are, in charge of those facilities?
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things where one hand washes the other. So I know in Lakes, we started to see a decline not only in numbers for participation, but we also started to see a decline in talent because we were trying to push kids up to the travel teams too soon because we kept wanting to expand our travel league program. And that created some uncompetitive teams. So instead of just fielding one really good team, we would field two teams that were both pretty mediocre and would end up getting bounced in the first or second round of a travel tournament. So I think that the Optimist Club was trying to focus more on developing talent in the more recreational leagues before moving them to travel and trying to cut down on the number of travel teams they had for going for the philosophy of quality over quantity.
Yeah, the person we had on last week, talking to them about the expense it is for travel teams, and it's amazing that parents are spending like $15,000 a year to have their kids involved in it, and then you look at, you talked about before of recreational sports for kids and whatnot, and them developing all these different skills that are not just athletic skills, but developmental skills of whatever. And so you wonder, is that the role of recreation departments now to try to say, hey, we need to turn this around and focus on the kids, the massive number of kids that they can't come out anymore because their parents don't have the money, and they're just left there with nothing to play sports.
Sure. So I think there's certainly a role for parks and recreation departments to fill in being able to subsidize some of the costs so that we can bring athletics and programs to the youth without breaking the bank. That's how we're going to become the most inclusive society, is by enabling all to be able to participate and play in our programs. But I think that travel is very much a choice. I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to participate in travel in order to get a good recreation experience and be able to play against solid competition and really refine and hone your skills. I think that we can focus on building a good baseline recreation program where the coaches are well versed and well trained in the best practices of the sport and industry, so that we can breed the best talent by building them up from the fundamentals up. And then from there, if they get older and they want to play travel ball, I mean, high school ball is a natural segue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems that with high school sports and whatnot, a lot of kids are lost to high school teams because they're playing on travel. But, one of the things, Austin, that I wrote the book, and the title of this show is Why Johnny Hates Sports, is people wonder and say, well, why did you create this organization? Well, it certainly wasn't about the problems maybe with travel ball and whatnot. It was what you might have seen in the introduction there about the National Alliance for Youth Sports. What I saw were a lot of those situations where you saw parents fighting in the stands. The one episode that you saw there with that father with his kid, that is, if you saw that whole episode, you would say, man, that is really ugly. That is a character classic thing of child abuse. I mean, the guy's wrapping his arm around the kid. People say, well, is he an actor? No, he wasn't an actor. The funny part was, it was filmed by ABC TV. They did a special called Little League Baseball and whatnot. And it was him holding at a curtain, thinking that they couldn't see, but he forgot they had a microphone on him. And he went on and jumped on his poor kid throughout the whole game. But I'm just wondering, Austin, even in your early career and, being down in Key West and wherever, have you ever seen situations like this? I know you have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unfortunate. I was fortunate not to see it too many times in my career, but there were a lot of issues both in the basketball leagues and in the baseball leagues. A lot of what was happening in basketball were parents trying to coach their kids from the stands, yelling at their kids. And then oftentimes we would have to go up and talk to the parents, ask them to calm down, give them a couple of warnings. And then if they couldn't calm down, there were a few occasions where we had to escort the parent off, and only one occasion where we had to get the police involved. But I know there's a local entity in North Carolina regionally that has a similar issue in their basketball leagues and has a regular police presence, just because of some of the escalated situations that have occurred down there. They have to have that presence in order to keep everyone safe. And that obviously sets a bad example for the kids if parents are fighting each other in the stands over a recreation game that's just supposed to be fun and developmental in nature. And then you have the other side of it where they're yelling at their kids and have to be escorted out because they can't control themselves, because they get angry at either their kid for not performing up to the standard they hold them to, or they get angry at the coach because the coach isn't coaching well enough in their opinion.
Doesn't that bother you as a recreation professional to see all that happen? I'll give you an example. I often compare the fact that recreation professionals are equally as important as classroom teachers. That's why we say that sports are the outdoor classroom. Supposing you had a parent come in to a classroom to watch a spelling bee, and the kid was 7 years old and misspelled whatever word it was. And the parent stood up in the back of the room and yelled and said, Jamie, how could you be so dumb and stupid? How could you miss that word? I mean, what do you think the school system would do with that person?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. There are parents that like to live vicariously through their children. So really, when their child makes a mistake, like misses a shot or misses an assignment, um, in basketball, then their parent gets upset because they see themselves through their child's eyes failing again or falling short. So I think that a lot of it is being able to try and set the standard with the parents. And we always have, everywhere I've gone, we've always had preseason meetings with the parents to set the expectations, talk about a code of conduct, and try and establish the standard of, hey, this is a fun league. Let's keep it fun. No one's winning the World Series out here. No one's winning the national championship. It's just a rec league for fun and development. And as long as the kids have fun and they get a little bit better by the end of the season, that's what we consider a success. So I mean, it's establishing that standard and getting the parents to understand that. Some of them just don't want to understand that, and that's a choice. But I think by and large, I think that if you're able to go in there and really set the expectations of what is absolutely zero tolerance, I think that that sets you up better for success and being able to mitigate or avoid situations like that where parents yelling at a kid for a simple mistake.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit before about parents and them sitting in the stands, and that's their kid out there, and they lose perspective of, hey, this is just a game and whatnot. And we all live vicariously through our kids. So nobody can escape that. It just, one way or the other, we do it. But this may be really putting you on the spot, Austin. But let's just say down the road now, you become the superintendent of recreation for whatever city. And now you see what we've just been talking about, and you say, you know what? This has been going on forever, since day one, of parents losing perspective, being emotionally, psychologically, and even sometimes physically abusive to their kids in sports. As that recreation superintendent, would you do anything that has never been done in the last 40 years?
I don't think necessarily you have to reinvent the wheel. So if I understand you correctly, I think that's more of a cultural shift. I think that's more of changing our policies and maybe some of our processes. I've been very fortunate in both of my previous stops in both Miami Lakes and Marathon to see what a well-established positive culture of building a recreation program that's meant to be fun and developmental. And I would follow those blueprints for the most part and trying to revamp that. I think that a lot of that is what you're willing to let go and not establishing a zero tolerance policy of parents' behavior like that. You have to, I think, not only have a meeting with them, but I think it's also important to have them sign a code of conduct where they have to read and actually agree in order for their child to participate in the program, to hold themselves to a certain level of conduct, or these are the consequences, and really lay that out. So I think that if I were the superintendent and I came into a city with an athletic culture like that, I would start taking those steps before the season to ensure that we reestablish the culture of being a fun developmental league, because something happened along the way where we lost our sight of that and just started to become extremely competitive. And I feel like the more competitive you get, ironically, the less competitive you are typically on the scoreboard, because you push so many of the talented kids out because they love the game. That's how they got to be that good. It's about showing up day in and day out and being able to practice. If they're not having fun, they're not going to show up to practice.
And if those parents that you just talked about that signed a code of ethics and behavior and they didn't live up to it, what would you do?
Well,
What
I
would
mean,
you
then
do to
you
those parents?
Sure. I mean, you take the necessary progressive discipline measures, you give them a warning, and then if they're not abiding by the warning, then you have to ask them to leave. If they don't leave, then, I mean, that's when, unfortunately, you sometimes have to get law enforcement involved, and that's an absolute last resort. And then you can start talking about suspensions. I know in a flag football league I administered once, we had to levy a suspension to a coach that got a little bit too heated and threw a ball at a referee. Like you can't do that. That's not acceptable. So there are consequences. And when the coach tried to dispute that, we showed him what he signed, the paper that he signed, the code of ethics. This is what the standard you're held to, and these are the consequences if you're not held to that. It was cut and dry, black and white, and he lost his dispute.
Yeah, well, that sounds like you're taking action. That's great to think that if down the road you became the recreation superintendent wherever, that you would be enforcing that kind of thing. I mean, it has always bothered me. I remember, Austin, with our kids who were in elementary school, and I went over to try to get into the school one day, and they said, you have to have a pass, you have to sign in. And I said, what's that for? And they said, well, we have to protect who's coming in here because we don't know who you are and whatnot. Well, would you believe that that same school had a huge backyard where kids had recess? I mean, 3 or 4 acres. And over in the corner of the outfield was a backstop. And before the season, they would have tryouts for all these baseball teams, players. And that field would be crowded with hundreds of kids. And I thought, look at all these parent volunteers out there with all these kids. Now, how are they not different from the people in that classroom teaching those kids? Why are they allowed out there without any credentials? We don't know who they are. And so my question to you is, do you really feel that the recreation director is equal to the classroom teacher?
To a certain extent, obviously, as a recreation director, you're more of a hands-off administrator, so you have the opportunity to set a standard for your department. So I think that it's more akin to being a school principal than it is necessarily a coach. But I do look at coaches as being essentially the fun teachers. They spend a lot less time with kids than a school teacher does, because you're looking at probably spending maximum of 2 hours a day, probably 3 or 4 times a week with them. So you're spending a substantial amount of time, and it's a lot of social time, because they're typically out there with their friends, with their family watching. And so it's certainly a critical juncture in their experience and development as a person. But I think that the making sure that policies are adhered to, ensuring that we establish the culture that we need to in order to deter problems and have a flourishing league that continues to grow every year. Because if you're a great league, you're going to have a waiting list and continue to have a waiting list every single year.
You know what's so great about having you on this show and the other recreation people? They are certified youth sport administrators. What's that mean to you, being a certified youth sport administrator?
Feel like that means that you are held to the gold standard of the industry. I think that that means that you are somebody that uses best practices to ensure that your league is operating at an optimal standard, and that you're able to have a fully functioning league that develops kids for fun, holds coaches to standards, make sure that they're trained, they're background checked, they're certified before they step out on the field, so that it's not just Johnny Stranger coming out there just because he used to play ball in high school and thinks he knows how to coach. It's actually holding your league to a standard where you're ensuring that the people are going out onto the field have the right mindset. They're in agreement with your philosophy of how to run the league, and they actually know what they're talking about and are trained to be able to handle different ages and maturity levels of players.
That's marvelous, and to think back that before there were certified youth sport administrators, that you just described what they were. For the most part, my experience over the years, and that was, they were ball players, and hey, I want to continue my athletic career, so I think I'll be a recreation person. But then they get into it and they find out that's not what it's all about. It's having to deal with all the things you talk about. And I just think it's so encouraging, Austin, that this show will go out to 12,500 people that are just like yourself, recreation people around the country. So it's so encouraging to hear your thoughts and your ideas and your forecast of what it should be, in the field of recreation, because all of us have been there that have seen it and experienced the good, the bad. I'll finish telling you a positive story, because I used to be out all the time talking about the National Alliance and when developing it. And I would tell stories of different ugly stories over and over. And then after one, a guy came up to me and he said, it's not all bad being a coach and whatnot. He said, let me tell you a story. He said, not long ago, I got invited to be the best man at this guy's wedding. And I said, who is this person, and who's he inviting me to be the best man at his wedding? And the guy said, I played baseball for you 22 years ago, and you were the greatest influence in my life at the most important time. And I've never forgotten how you made me who I am today. Isn't that a great story? And that's the story. That's the story, Austin. I think that all recreation people would love to be able to, to give to these coaches that are out there, to be able to say, it's not all about winning. It's all about developing kids, making them the best possible people that they can possibly be.
Absolutely. I mean, you never understand fully the impact that you've made and the ripple effect that has until you have an experience like that, where a kid invites you to their wedding when you didn't even you didn't necessarily remember them as an individual, but they remembered you because you made such a positive impression. You were an inspiration in their life.
Well, I want to thank you very much. We've been talking today to Austin Tubbs from Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been there many a time. And Austin, I want to thank you for such a great job, and keep doing the great job that you're doing in recreation up there.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good weekend.
All right. You as well.
Why Johnny Hates Sports is a best-selling book about kids in sports. It chronicles why, at a very early age, children are thrust into organized sports long before they have the necessary skills to feel successful. Fathers and mothers are asked to be their coach without having any training on how to coach. And the leagues in which kids play are governed by volunteers whose main focus becomes scoreboards, championships, and all-star games. Statistics show that close to 70% of kids will have quit by the age of 13. Most said it ceased to be fun. And that's why Johnny Hates Sports.
Well, there we go with another edition this Friday morning at 11. And I want to thank you for tuning in, and look forward to next Friday morning at 11 at the same time. And we'll have another special guest from around the country. Have a good weekend.
This program is sponsored by Sir Durf Publishing in the interest for better sports for kids, better kids for life.